The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
Due to the pandemic, with now this new Omicron variety of the virus, business has to still face uncertainty not only in Georgia but around the whole world. BMG English has published a very interesting piece by Reiner Preiss on 2022 investment outlook, which was later followed up by the sit-down interview with the author for the Checkpoints. Reiner Preiss serves as an investment advisor and portfolio strategist. Here is what his outlook for 2022 looks like.
Michael, thank you so much for visiting us. It's a pleasure to host you in our virtual studio, and I hope to see you finally in Georgia in the at least near future. Yeah.
Yes, I very much look forward to that. Yes.
Thank you so much. You are observing and you are monitoring markets worldwide. You are an observer of various international TV channels besides advising some global companies as well. Where do we stand so far? The first month of 2022 does not look like that we are coming out from the sphere of, let me say, uncertainty. Let me begin with it. So how can you evaluate the situation existing right now?
I would say that potentially we are at a larger inflection point. That is partly due to the fact that the world has been run on very, very cheap money and a lot of government stimulus. And a lot of that, of course, was due to the pandemic, but it looks like we're getting to the end of this. And Western central banks, led by the Federal Reserve in the United States, are in the process of raising interest rates, potentially at the time when we're getting closer to the end of the cycle. And public equities in the US are at very elevated levels. So stocks are expensive. And forward guidance potentially could disappoint more.
At the same time, where do you see some sort of risks for the markets? They were very much aware that the era of stimulating the markets will end on some day. And finally, the Federal Reserve System announced that in the nearest future, they will change the rules for the market. Is it the only reason of the turmoil happening on markets?
I think that is one of the main reasons. I think the other reason for increased turmoil in the market is the fact that geopolitical risk has been underestimated. And I mean, you're closer to part of the problem than I am. But for example, Russia's activities outside the Ukraine and closer to where I am in Asia, the People's Republic of China and its positioning towards Taiwan or Republic of China increasingly becomes a concern for investors globally as well.
Michael, can we suggest that these are the two reasons? I mean, expectations and let me say so, comeback of the Fed's decision, which will take place by Wednesday, and at the same time, we might have some clearness, let me say so, in the field of geopolitical. Is this the only and two major reasons what is happening within the markets right now?
Well, I think the other key factor is that inflationary pressures are still rising. And of course, here, geopolitical tensions potentially further complicate the inflation question. And with regards to China, which is the large economy, the second largest economy in the world, China's so-called zero COVID policy is virtually still further adding to supply chain bottlenecks, which again, as a knock-on effect, leads to higher inflation in the world.
In the beginning of the week, we faced problems in the worldwide stocks and exchanges, but at the same time, what we faced by Monday evening was suspension of all the trades happening on the Russian market, where the central bank decided to suspend trading with the foreign currency. Where is it still a part of the story, or where do you see any weaknesses of the Russian financial system in this regards, while most influential agencies are delivering the news that investors are leaving their positions within the Russian ruble and stocks and also other securities?
I mean, look, if you think about it, and everybody who has invested in Russia will tell you that the Russian fundamentals of the Russian stock market and also the economic fundamentals are actually very sound. The real problem is so-called sanctions risk, and more importantly, the nuclear option that Mr. President Biden talked about, and that would be to potentially take Russia off the SWIFT or the dollar standard. That is not priced in, and I think that is the reason why, according to Bloomberg data, Russia is now the world's worst performing market in the world. And don't forget, the free capital market is still basically run by Western countries that still very much at the moment oppose Vladimir Putin's initiatives in the Ukraine.
Correct. But at the same time, Michael, I will use the opportunity to ask you how it's realistic that Russia could be switched off from at least SWIFT system, which is a world payment system, and at the same time based in Belgium.
Yes, correct. I mean, that is a good question. And but again, look, I mean, as I sometimes say, when there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
And don't forget, the United States is not only the world's reserve currency, but the United States also still has the largest military in the world.
And military actions around the Ukrainian border and all the military aid, what is happening by US and allies, it is still turmoiling the situation within the markets, correct?
That's right, yes, correct. And it leads to the so-called risk aversion rising. And again, people become more nervous, especially at a time when also we had a major run in equities so far globally already. I mean, since the pandemic low, equities have done extremely well, but don't forget, equities are also risk asset. And the combination of higher interest rates and potentially lower corporate earnings is very much a headwind for stocks. And that leads to nervousness in the market.
Michael, my final question is taking into consideration your last op-ed you delivered through BMG. You're resuming your op-ed by quoting British economist and founder of the World Bank, Maynard Keynes. If the facts change, I change my opinion. What do you do, sir? We are in the period when everything is changing and we might face absolutely different situation within 15 minutes. How realistic is to make any kind of predictions or prognosis financial during 2022, and what kind of year do we expect ahead?
Well, I think number one, I think this year most probably will lead to lower investment returns and lower returns at higher levels of volatility. That is potentially the most likely outcome. And with regards to what is changing, I think the key fact that is changing, that the so-called Fed put is increasingly more difficult. And don't forget, rates in America have already gone to zero, right? They believe that the Federal Reserve Bank can always step in to support the market. That could be a false belief.
Thank you so much. Let's keep in touch, Michael. And so far, that's the maximum what we can. So stay safe and good luck.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.